Welcome to Mocha Wave Talks. We're in our third season and we have a new theme going on. So what we're doing is Mocha Meets. So last time Mocha meets a book talker, and we learned about how book talk can help authors get their books before readers. And now I have a second episode, and we're trying to decide Mocha meets who, right? Because we have Nikki Elizabeth, and she wears many hats. She is a copywriter, an author, a reporter, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about herself, and we'll decide which hat best suits this interview. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Nikki.
Yeah, I'm a Cleveland native, born and raised. And like you said, I've worn so many hats throughout my career. So I started writing professionally in 2007. I was a reporter, I did on camera, and I also did written work, but I kind of naturally gravitated toward that writing aspect. I did that for many years, and then I ended up going into travel blogging. So I still do travel writing to this day. I've been doing that since 2016, 2017. And it's such a passion of mine. And I was in the magazine world and just naturally found my way into the corporate world after a while. So I do public relations, marketing, copywriting, and content creation. So a lot of different hats, but they've all kind of gravitated around writing in some way.
So I think that's interesting because you see how writing is calling you, but in many different ways. And the way I met you was through another author, and her name was Tirsa Darnell, and she met you online, I imagine, and she was saying, so these are the things I've heard, okay? I've heard you're super supportive of authors. So she was like, wow, she's really, really helping authors get out there. And I think that's lovely when authors help other authors, writers are helping other writers. And she's read your book. So I think she may be almost done reading the book, and it's called Industrialized. So you have
Yes,
that
and
there.
I have it here.
And so she said words like, wow, when she's reading it. And she said, this is so interesting because it's different. She usually doesn't like romance. She's someone that doesn't read romance very often, but she said, this is very interesting because it's a dystopian style romance is a word. And she's also used words like, she's kind of like between steampunk and cyberpunk. She's like, it's sort of a merging of that in her mind. And she's talked about some kind of mechanical girdle. She's like, this is so
Yeah, the iron corset. Yeah.
so some really interesting concepts. And she says she really likes, because even as female authors, sometimes it's hard for us to write about a strong female character because of just at least for me it was hard because you have in media you don't have a lot of how do I stylize a strong female, and it's getting better, I think. But I'm always impressed when people can write a female character or a male character, but mostly a female character that's believable. So I really wanted to talk to you and get to know about you, your book, and your journey.
Yeah, so I guess I could start about my book writing journey because I haven't really touched on that in my career. Before I was a journalist, I was writing books, and I finished my first the summer before high school. I started it in 8th grade and then I finished it that summer. And it was horrible. It was so bad. But, it got me started with sitting down and putting pen to paper and writing out my ideas. And it got me through the editing phase. And long story short, I wrote a few books, and then in 2011, I was really into dystopian literature at the time, which kind of explains how we ended up here. The Egyptian revolution was unfolding on TV screens, and I was an archaeology student at the time. I wanted to work in Egyptology. So I was just in my mind, I'm reflecting on the situation I'm seeing unfold and this dystopian literature I was reading and thinking, my gosh, what if something like this happened at home? And what would it take for people from, presumably a proud culture or maybe a new culture to want to dismantle their heritage. How mad would you have to be? And so I started thinking about this concept essentially. If it happened here in the United States, I assumed it would probably have to do with corporations in some way. Big business getting involved, or just these murky ethics that would bring us to a point where we'd want to dismantle what we became. And so that was kind of the concept for Industrialized. And it was born around 2012. So I started taking notes, built a few characters, not even the main character, just the side characters. And then the story was finally started. And then I started working and wearing so many hats that I just didn't have time to finish it. So I finally got around to finishing it in late 2019. And then the pandemic happened. And since it's a dystopian, I had to go back and rewrite bits because some of the things I had mentioned kind of happened. So it went through a few iterations during the pandemic. And then we finally got to a point that felt close enough to our reality while still being kind of like a subtle reference to our reality. And the book came out in April of this year. So it's very, very new, and I'm really excited about it.
Wow. So it's been a long journey, but it hasn't been out that long.
No, it was a very long journey. This is the only book I've ever written that has taken me over 10 years. I mean, it was part 1 and part 2 that I was working on during that time. So it wasn't like I wrote the first and now I still have to write the second. The second is done. It's just in editing. But yeah, it was a very long journey and a big labor of love.
So would you, because all I know is from what I've heard, right? And I've been very impressed from what I've been hearing. Would you call this a romance or a dystopian romance? What genre do you feel like it fits?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a really interesting point because I'm actually aro ace. I am in a relationship, but romance is just not my cup of tea. So I'm not a reader of romance. I don't consider myself a writer of romance, but after I published this book as a dystopian piece, dark romance readers started coming up to me and saying, hey, that's like what this is. So I've been saying it's a dark romance, but usually those are a little bit more, in your face and kind of, I don't know what I want to call them, rough.
Rough is a good word.
I guess it's a dystopian romance or a dystopian dark romance. It's kind of walking the line. We've got at the center of the story this industrialist, this corporate giant who has a lot of money and a lot of power, and he's very unkind to the people around him, including his love interest. So that's kind of where that comes in, because there's a lot of bickering. It's really not there's no pet names, it's not a very like happy kind of romance.
It's not cutesy.
It's not cutesy, no.
What was it that you usually use to try to pull your readers in? What are some of the terms or concepts that you use when you're convincing people to read your book?
Yeah, recently I have been saying profit over people and money over morals.
Some tropes there. I like that.
It's the best way I can capture the story because as Terza mentioned, there's an iron corset in here. There's an AI doll. There's pirates. Like, it's a very genre agnostic dystopian story, if that makes sense. It plays with a lot of different details.
I like that because I think the reason she mentions like steampunk is, sometimes we relate steampunk with Victorianism, and I think she was kind of like corset, mechanical corset, that's kind of where she was getting that. Or iron, what is it? Ironclad corset?
They use them both interchangeably, the iron corsets or mechanical corsets. But yeah, there's corsets, there's bustle skirts, there's those little Victorian booties. So we've definitely got some of the Victorian fashion in there. But like you also mentioned, there's kind of a cyberpunk element because it's very futuristic. So it's kind of, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Archer, where it kind of exists out of time and they pull in like different pieces from different times. It kind of feels like that.
How sometimes the pendulum goes one way and we get a lot of freedom and a lot of acknowledgement of different viewpoints. And then all of a sudden there's a fear and then we kind of swing the other way, and it gets to be, again, I sometimes have this worry that we're going to go back to that Victorianism, right, with that, and in a different way, right, in a different way, because
Mhm.
it's never exactly the same, but history does sometimes.
I totally agree. And I think when I was sitting down to write the book, that's kind of what I was thinking through is I mean, at the core of the story, you see this parallel to the yellow wallpaper. I'm sure you're familiar with that story
Oh
where,
yeah.
you've got this just poor woman who's trapped in a room and she's kind of unraveling because
Hmm.
she's alone and she's suffering, and that's what the narrator is doing while she's telling you this story is she's sitting in a prison. She was placed at the edge of a war zone with a shackle on her wrist. She can go get water, but that's it. There's no one else around her. She's all by herself. She's run out of food, and she gets to the point where she's like, I turned on the water one day and I just watched it run.
Mm-hmm.
Like it very much harkens back to a lot of those kind of Victorian worries that we've been fighting for so long. And in some ways, I definitely think it's a possible future, but that's why we tell stories like this.
Say like, no, don't let that happen, right?
Don't let this happen.
Yes, I like that. I like that a lot because, Tirsa and I, when we have our conversations, we sometimes talk about, some of the backlash that we're afraid of, that, because
Mhm.
people get afraid and they're afraid of losing their power dynamic, they may, you see it, I see a little bit of it in the media, where
Yeah.
we had some powerful female characters, and then now it's kind of like we make our powerful female characters monstrous so that we can
Mhm.
contain them. And I'm like, that's a little unnerving if you read between the lines.
It's super unnerving. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier in the conversation. It's so important to have these strong female characters where, at the core of who they are, they're a human being. They're not a
Yeah.
monster. They're a very flawed, realistic, down-to-earth person in a lot of cases. And whether it's the news or whether it's a fictional story, we need to see that kind of representation.
I resonate with what you're saying about your female character because when I wrote my story, it's a fantasy, but it's the main character is a female 19-year-old. And I had a male reader was reading it, and he's like, usually when I read fantasy, I fall in love, or I have this like, ooh, like sexy, female lead character. They kind of, and she was like, but this one, she just feels like a regular girl. I'm like, yeah, that's because that's what she is. Right?
Right.
They
And
don't
that's, I
have to
mean,
be.
those make the best stories, right? It's like it could be your neighbor, it could be your friend, it could be a family member. Just when
Yeah.
you can recognize the humanity in these fictional characters, it's a magic that we can't even write into a fantasy. It's just it transcends words. I don't know if you do this as a writer, but I heard many, many years ago that we as authors should know at least 20 things about our main characters that the reader doesn't. And so
Uh,
that's something I always set out to do to humanize them is I do character analyses where I sit down and I write out everything, their opinion of their childhood, what their voice sounds like, what they do when they're not doing whatever the story is about. And I just try to see them as this person that I know very personally, and my reader is not going to know to that level, just to make them really authentic.
So you also are working on something else, I hear.
Yes. So I'll pull that book up for reference too. It's called Peace on Earth and Mercy Mild. It's a romantasy. So this one actually is real romance. I really wanted to work with that audience because I see so many people on like Bookstagram and TikTok, Book Talk, who only read romance.
Yeah.
And that's not what I typically write. Like love will be an element in my stories,
Hmm.
but it's never the focus. So what I wanted to do with this was create kind of a love letter to my fellow writers. It's sometimes you have to follow a certain script. In my day job, there's only so many ways I can write a press release. They're always going to have that same hierarchy. So this story is structured like a Hallmark movie. A girl from the big city goes to her boring small town for Christmas. She really doesn't want to be there. But the twist is she's a vampire. And so she goes on this like crazy adventure. There's a lot of biblical elements that come into play. Satan comes to Connecticut. It's just a big, wild adventure, but it follows this traditional script. So it's a really fun ride. It's a really easy read. And it's a really pleasant break from Industrialized because
Yeah.
part one ends on it's a note. I wouldn't say it's a good note.
Okay. Not to give away too much, but
I wouldn't say it's an unhappy ending, but it's probably not the happiest ending they could have had. So Peace on Earth and Mercy Mild, they have their happily ever after, and it's a great way for readers to kind of recover before part two comes out early next year.
well, what stage are you at with Mercy? Can you hold it up one more time so I can catch the title one more time?
Yeah, it's
Peace
Peace on
on
Earth and
Earth
Mercy
and Mercy
Mild.
Mom. So where are you with that? Is it coming out or is it in ARC reads or edits?
Yeah, so it is coming out as an ARC book in July. So I am growing my team currently, and I'll have my applications open all month. Beyond that, I will probably be releasing it close to November this year. I
Oh,
don't have a final date,
that's such a good
but
time for that. Yes.
I figured, just have a fun Christmas story. I'm never going to tell a story like this again, just because I tend to gravitate toward heavier topics. So I want to have fun with it.
I really am excited about what you're doing because it sounds new and interesting and important, and yet something that's going to just, you have these books and you read them and, that was nice, but this seems like something that will stick, right? And something that it's going to be something that I feel like it's going to be big, like it's going to be really, really big. And I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, thank you. I am super excited about it too. And I totally agree. As a reader, I like those books that haunt me. I
Yeah.
want them to stay in the back of my mind. I want to catch myself reflecting on it years later when I haven't picked it up in ages. And I think that's what I really want to strive to do as an author.
Yes.
And I do have my next two books after Industrialized Part 2 and Mercy are out. So I guess I've got my next 4 releases planned. And they're just as resonant and haunting and beautiful at the same time as just kind of the standard I've already been setting.
That's wonderful. I'm sure that as you continue on and you get the feedback and you see what works for you, I just see it just getting better. I mean, it's already great and it's just going to get better. So I'm really excited. And I want to read some of your books. I mean, I'm talking like I've read your book because I'm just so excited from what I've heard, but I want to read your books now. So
Oh my gosh. Well, I appreciate that. I'll hook you up with a copy. We'll talk.
awesome, awesome. I'm looking forward to that. I did want to touch on your supportive authors.
Yeah.
So what are some things that you do because I know I've seen the author spotlights. What are some of the focuses that you like to take with that?
Yeah. So it's going to sound so silly, but it started with my travel writing. What I do is I go out and I specialize in the area I'm in. So if people come here as tourists, I'm their local expert that knows all the spots. They can go through my thousands of articles. But I learned it was so special to spotlight local businesses, these small mom and pop shops. And each one is doing something really special in some way. Everyone's got their own spin. And I realized when I started blogging as an author that I kind of wanted to do the same with the author community. So I started reaching out to other indies, and I've been setting up just a series of interviews. I do about 1 a week on my blog. I think we've probably got about 20 so far.
Wow.
It's been such a great success. People are really excited about it. And I've been spotlighting everyone I talk to on Instagram. I share the links with other authors who share them with their friends so we can spread the word about just what these incredible people are doing. And then I put up like a story post, and I have a series of all those different authors that I have spotlighted pinned to my Instagram. So anyone who comes to my account can just click through and see which genres and authors resonate with them.
I love that.
Back to what you were saying though about making your mark with the stories you're trying to tell and elevating that certain message and that certain voice. I think as writers, if we have a platform, we have kind of a responsibility to do so, not just for our own stories, but for others.
It's true. I like that. Well, it has been lovely talking with you today, Nikki. Is there anything else that you would like to add or anything else you want viewers to know?
Um, I will say follow me online. You can find me on Instagram at author Nikki Elizabeth. I am accepting readers for Peace on Earth and Mercy Mild. This is the ARC cover, not the final, but they're going to be going out very soon. So whether you like reading traditionally or audiobooks, I'll have both available in July,
Oh,
and it will be coming out probably in November.
right.
So stay tuned. I'm excited to have everyone here on the journey with me.